Welcome to Ham and Jam, the World War II British Airborne podcast, hosted by Andy Bryant and Kevin Getz.
Andy, babe, listen, I got to get more from you. I got to have more emotion. I want you to think about this scene, okay? You're in the glider, you've crashed, everybody, they're dead in the back, and you've pulled your best mate out and he's dying. I need more emotion from you. You understand what I'm saying? Okay, scene 13, 2, ready, lights, camera, action. And that, listeners, if you haven't already figured out, we are going to chat everything British Airborne via Hollywood. I can't do this without my co-host, Andy Bryant. Andy, how you doing?
Well, after that intro, you might very well be doing already right.
So we're going to discuss everything British Airborne in film. And if you're going to do that, you got to do it with the guys who absolutely own the market on military films. And it is a great pleasure for us to introduce the Fighting on Film lads, Matthew Moss and Robbie McGuire. Matt and Robbie, how you doing?
Hi, chaps. How's it going?
Hello. Yeah, we're good. Well, thank you for joining us in our virtual pub.
Absolute pleasure.
We have to ask you, what are you drinking?
I am on a Green King level head.
I'm on a Liquid Death Mango Chainsaw Water.
I'm not going to surprise anyone by saying that I'm drinking a Guinness. So if you just like to raise your glass, cheers.
Cheers. So, guys, we're Ham and Jam. On our podcast, we're always discussing the British Airborne. So we had to have you guys on to discuss British Airborne in film. And there were 6 films we wanted to kind of go over. It kind of gets your thoughts. Obviously, there's going to be 3 very iconic films, and there's probably 1 or 2 in there that people haven't really heard or seen.
Absolutely.
But we think we have a mystery film for you guys that you may not have seen.
Oh, that could be interesting. Well, how about we start with the Red Beret?
Okay. Yeah.
The only on-film depiction of the Bruneval raid to date, apart from a British Army SSVC documentary that was made in, I think, 1984 or 6. No, it would have been 82 for the anniversary, wouldn't it, of biting? Bruneval, sorry. So
there's a fictionalized version in School for Secrets, which is okay.
I mean, it's Alan Ladd, the peak of his powers. I mean,
Miscast, though.
Yeah, horrendously miscast. It's a little bit a Yank in the RAF. He's a Canadian in it, you know.
He's an American posing as a Canadian.
American posing as Canadian. You know, that's a bit iffy. But it's not shocking. It's just not a great movie, I don't think.
No.
Yeah.
Like, there's just, it kind of, you got Stanley Baker in a really early role. He candlesticks, doesn't he, halfway through the film, jumps out the Wellington and...
Yeah, he's overdubbed as well because his Welsh accent was too broad, apparently. Which sounds like absolute rubbish.
That's right. It just, when you watch it, it looks kind of weird, like disjointed off.
It is odd. It is odd. But then again, it historically, it's got some good things in there. So you go from the early kind of para smock, the big brown sack type, to Denison's. And that's nice because that's rarely done, I think. You don't usually get that in movies, that you get every mark of Sten going, I think. Even Mark 1 stars, which is incredibly rare. It has some things going for it, but I don't know. It's not. I think it's often like sort of disregarded in that sort of 50s.
I think because it just lacks as a film. It's not one I would sit down and go, oh, good, Red Beret's on. You know, it's just not one of those films. But I would say that, as Rob mentioned, it does have that element that it does show the foundation in the beginning of the airborne forces, and it shows the training which you never see in any other film. That's a real plus point. Up at Ridgeway, they're doing their training, but the main thing with the film is just Ladd, to me, isn't particularly engaging as a lead. The supporting cast isn't bad, but at least you have that classic in a quarry battle thing at the end. There's always and it depicts Tunisia as well, which is interesting. So it doesn't go all the way through. It decides to end at Tunisia. And
let me ask you guys this, because I know Andy and I had talked about this. I think, well, first of all, it's a film of its time. It definitely shows its age of its time. But I almost wonder if it was a better film if they do away with all the Tunisia stuff and just do all of the training up until their raid and just end it after the raid.
Probably.
I think it would, because I think all the film's kind of good set pieces are in that Bruneval thing. They don't really say it's Bruneval, but it clearly is. And I don't know whether at the time, maybe some of Bruneval was under the Secrets Act or something. I don't know. But it's like, maybe there's a reason you can't do that, or it's Alan Ladd and he needs another big action sequence because, he's the big star and God forbid he doesn't get something to do. So it's a little bit like, I wish it had ended at the Bruneval raid so I wouldn't have to watch any more of it, but that's just me.
The early stuff in that movie is definitely the better part of the film. And as you say, Ladd just looked really uncomfortable all the way through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any one particular scene that you guys liked about that film?
I liked the training sequence, where it's some of it's clearly like back projected, which is weird. And it's got like a load of guys in the background doing calisthenics and like dummy jumps and stuff. And I like, there's a little fight sequence, which is possibly one of those really early instances where a war movie trope is like, come at me. And, you got an instructor that thinks he's the big I am. So that's quite fun.
I enjoyed the shooting in the sort of like manor house on the Bruneval raid.
Yes.
Where you got Ladd being gunned down on the stairs. That's quite cool. Bit of hip firing with the Sten. We love a point shoot on our show. So if anyone gets riddled with 9mm, I'm there.
One of the scenes that I liked, because I think it really did a nice job of capturing the essence of when what's her name packs his Alan Ladd's chute, and he keeps going back to her, because I think it captures that feeling those guys had that if one particular packer, the chute, if it's successfully open, I'm going back to her because there's good luck with it.
Yeah, I think there's a good amount of technical stuff in there that it doesn't deserve, in my opinion, really. It's one of those movies where I'm like, everything is really good in here from like a sort of kit point of view. You've got some great actors, but like the movie itself, meh.
I think the only other time you see a parachute packing haul is Longest Day, isn't it?
Yeah.
But no, I agree there, because I think with Red Beret it's not a great film, but all the little inclusions and the details that it includes in there, there's a lot of stuff that film has that all the other Airborne Forces movies just don't have. So it has to be, mentioned, and it's definitely one to see, even if it isn't the top of the list.
And one thing to keep an eye out for is in the North Africa scene where one guy is blowing away with a brain gun with no magazine in it.
Yeah, that's good.
It's the attention to detail that makes these films.
Oh, yeah.
So, out of 10, what are we going to give the Red Beret?
6.
5. Yeah,
Ooh.
5.5.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Kev?
I got to agree with Robbie on this one. So, yeah, that 5 at most. What do you think, Andy?
Well, yeah, I think about 5, 6 at most. But, yeah, game of two halves, that film, I think.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Anyway, what's next on the list then, Kev?
This one's going to be interesting because I had a really hard time finding any clips on it. And I don't know to what extent you guys have access. And that's The Long Days Dying.
I will admit, and again, hard film to find. It gets shown here on maybe like one of the like odd movie channels that we have in the UK.
Yeah.
Really rarely. But I've seen maybe over like the last 10 years, I've seen probably like half an hour of it. And it's a very cerebral affair. It's not necessarily what you think it's going to be, but it's something else. I've not seen much of it.
I saw it. It must have been one of the D-Day anniversaries, and it may have been in the early 2000s. Channel 4 played it late on at night, and it's a very Channel 4 film, actually, for the British listeners. I watched it. I thought, okay, interesting, but this is me remembering 20 years ago, probably.
Yeah.
It's a very hard film to try and get through. It's one of those early new wave of anti-war movies.
Yes.
And the scripting of it is pretty labored. It hits some really interesting but really bleak themes. There's a lot of ruminating on killing and the nature of war and that sort of stuff. It's an interesting one because spoilers, like it's quite a bleak film. You follow 3 or 4 paras. It's never really made clear what operation it's on, whether it's Varsity or it's Market Garden. I always just assumed it was Market Garden. I don't think the film actually says that I can remember. But yeah, it's a weird one because the chap who directed it, Peter Collinson, the film he made after it. Does anyone know what the film he made after it was? The Italian Job. So he does. Yeah, absolutely. So he does this really quite, as Rob said, cerebral, heavy, bleak anti-war movie, and then he goes and does the Italian Job. And the year after the Italian Job, he does You Can't Win Them All, which is a film set in the Civil War in Greece in the 20s. It's a rip-roaring kind of like everyone's got Tommy guns and lighting up cavalry, and it's a wild film.
I seem to remember like the process of making it was a bit hard for Collinson. I think it was meant to have a bigger budget. It was meant to have a bigger star than David Hemmings. And I think he threw together what he could.
There's a couple of set pieces throughout it.
Yeah. Very filmed in a barn, in someone's farm, Yeah.
It,
But you
does kind of
get
have that 60s feel to it, doesn't it?
It's a shame because I feel like for £1 million at it, I think it could have been something.
I thought it was interesting too, because you mentioned Hemmings, who ended up being Captain Nolan in charge of the Light Brigade.
Again, another anti-war movie of that period. Which is a little bit laboured.
The guy who wrote the script for Long Days Dying is Charles Wood, who also wrote the script for Charge of the Light Brigade.
He and Collinson had a really varied career.
Yeah, it certainly is an anti-war film, but it's very odd.
Yeah, it's not easy to find either.
It would be hard for me to comment on because I've just basically seen like a 2-minute clip. Is there anything that you liked about?
Yeah, there's a bit where there's like minimal webbing from what I remember, but here and there. But then they're running around with like the Sten mags in the top of their Denny pockets. And I quite like that. That was quite cool. Yeah. But I think it's what they could scratch together. It feels a little bit like, I don't think everyone's got a weapon.
It's wild, isn't it? Because I think Rob and I are going to introduce you to a film a bit later on that you might not be familiar with. It's a very independent film, which actually arguably does kit better than Long Days Dying.
Actually, it does.
So it's an interesting one.
And it was made for probably not even a fraction of what that film was made for. This is like budget filmmaking when we talk about it with you.
What are our thoughts on The Long Days Dying? What are we giving it out of 10?
I can't mark it because I've not seen it in full. I think it'd be unfair.
I think the same here. I can't mark it. I haven't seen it. So
5 asterisk.
There we go.
5 in need of a rewatch because it was 20 years ago.
Yeah. So let's go with the more recent film. And I know you guys covered this one, and it drew a lot of, it drew some, I don't want to say controversy, but it was very clear. People either really loved it or they really hated it. We got to go with The Forgotten Battle. Your thoughts?
I mean, famously, I did not enjoy it. I had high hopes for it because we saw the glider sequence in the trailer and we're like, ooh, okay.
Yeah.
And then the film came out, we watched it, and we were like, how did the guys on Market Garden end up at the Battle of Walcheren? It's 2 months apart. And they went walking around in like mid-Holland for 2 months. Whoever did the storyboarding and the plotting for that film were just completely unaware of A, the concept of time, and B, the concept of history. It's so bizarre.
I can't name you the actor's name, but I met someone who was on it, and they essentially said the glider bit was good, wasn't it? And I went, oh, what did you think of the rest of the movie? And he was like, no comment. So I know I liked the glider bit. That's where all your money went.
I rewatched the glider bit before coming on the show because I wanted to refresh the good bit of the film. And the dialogue in that sequence is terrible. There's only 3 guys in the back of the Horser, which I was like, that's a bit weird.
They were carrying jeeps, and that's why I thought they had less men.
Yeah, the Jeep in the back. I know I rewatched it again last night, and there's a Jeep. You can see, blink and you'll miss it. There's camera netting over what looks like a Jeep.
And that would explain why the glider goes down like a sack of spuds, because it's got a lot of heavy stuff in it. Yeah,
absolutely.
But then that's clever movie making because then you can have less actors and you don't have to pay anyone anymore.
Exactly, yeah.
So that helps. No, I think that sequence is clearly the standout. The lads sitting on the wreckage of the glider, wondering where they are and things. But then the time jump,
where they're in the flooded, fields and stuff.
Yeah, those parts are great. But the time jump is so egregious that it lost me as a viewer because I was like, well, I could buy these guys hiding out for 2 months, but we barely see any of that because you're flitting between the German point of view, the Dutch guy's point of view.
It's doing 4 points of view, isn't it? Which makes it very difficult to follow in a kind of coherent manner.
It's too much, but the kit levels were good in that film, I think, from what they did. Really quite high levels of stuff. All the lads are sort of wearing that mid-war, para look that we all know. But it was just a shame that the movie didn't really bring it all together. And then kind of when it got to the Walcheren stuff, that was annoying because
it's almost like the Canadians were thrown in as an afterthought. It was like it's like they had made this film and then they realized we better throw some Canadians in here because it's the Battle of the Shell. And it's like,
It's weird. It was just odd. Like, and I'm always a bit wary when I see films like that, and it's like, oh, 3 concurrent stories, and I'm like, well, one will be the weaker one because you rarely make that work. And there's only maybe a handful of films that make that work. So when I was going in, I was like, right, okay, what one's going to be the weakest? And it kind of annoyed me a little bit that the para stuff, in its way, was sometimes the weakest because it had to pull away from it, so there wasn't as much of it. So it's like, and once you get past that set piece in the glider for me, which should be in a different movie, you know, it should be in a Arnhem film, you know, it should be, you know, cut that into something because it's great. But once you leave there, I was just a bit like, it's a shame. Yeah. Because what it should have been, it just was not.
I almost wonder if a better film would have been, after they crashed, the Susan Ratter's Visser character helps them get the whole
away.
Escape and evade. That would have been a much better film. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the glider stuff, it's a bit unfair for me because I work at the Army Flying Museum. I walk past a Horsa glider every day. So the minute I saw they didn't have pilot's wings and all that, I can start picking apart the Horsa and everything. It looks fine. And, you know, it's more than you'd normally see of Horsa gliders. So that's one thing. But me with my nitpicker head on, I was, that's not right.
I think I famously went on a rant about the glider pilot regiment in that episode. I think I got really angry.
We were so excited that the glider pilot regiment was getting some representation on film.
Yeah, their second depiction on screen ever, and you don't even look at an Osprey book to go, oh, that's the badges they need. Like, I was like, where's the sergeant stripes?
There's a bit where the young lad says, "I'm just thinking about all the Germans I'm going to kill."
Yeah,
and I'm like, what?
Well, you won't be, mate. Because once you land, you've got to go and find all your glider pilot buddies, then work out whether you're going home or going out on a patrol. And you should know that because you're a glider pilot.
I actually think there's 3 depictions of glider pilots. Actually, so you've got the longest day, you've got the Forgotten Battle, and there are glider pilots in the background in A Bridge Too Far.
And theirs is. They are in theirs.
Yeah, so it's 4 actually.
Yes, there is briefly. Yeah. But again, I'm like Andy. As soon as you know me, I'm that guy that says the Horsa single-handedly won the Second World War. So there you go. And I like the Horsa scenes, but it just overall was really disappointing. And normally I'm not a CGI guy, but I think in this case, the one problem I did have with the Horsa scene is, okay, if they're carrying Jeeps and they land that hard at that angle, I'm sorry, they're all dead.
They're all toast. Yeah.
They're toast.
They're all getting a Willis Jeep bloody winch in the back of the head, you know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, are we going to say that it's not a bad movie, but it's not exactly a good movie?
You could do worse. If you're on Netflix, you can do worse, but you can do better for airborne depictions. But if you just want to see a cool bit of Horsa on screen, watch the clip on YouTube, and it's free, you know.
Yeah, and then ditch the rest of the movie.
Exactly, yeah. I give it a 6 out of 10, I think.
4.
That's an extra point for the Horsa.
No, 4 for me.
4? Oh,
I just didn't like it. I didn't enjoy the film.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Andy, what are you going with?
I'm going to go with a 4 as well.
Is the bits that you're excited about seeing because it's representation are then not really done that well. So you're kind of like, you're underwhelmed and disappointed at the same time. And you're like, oh.
I was excited when I saw that Wackos were going to be in Rogue Heroes in the second season, the first episode. They're going to have the invasion of Sicily. There's going to be Ladbrokes going to be in there. And I bloody hated it.
Yeah, I'll go with 5. You know, it just is meh. The stuff that I liked was really cool, but the stuff that was bad was really bad. So it canceled each other out.
What's up next, Kev?
I don't know. Let's let Robbie and Matt decide.
Shall we do our mystery film, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ooh,
Let's do
yes.
that. Let's do that.
Do you want to tell them or shall I?
Well, I'll lead in and then you can jump in. So,
okay, cool.
Cast your mind back. It's the mid-60s. You're in a pub in Stoke. A man walks in. He's got a fag in his mouth and he says, "I'm making a film outside. I need a couple of lads to come and help." They get up and they go outside, and he's got a van in the car park, and it's got a couple of Denisons and some odds and sods. And he says, "We're making a film about someone called John Baskerville." So the thing is,
for the listener, Andy and Kev have just exploded with glee. For the listener, I love the fact this isn't a mystery film.
I've not listened to it, but I've listened to the pod episode of Fighting on Film at least twice, probably 3 times.
Need to see it if you haven't seen it. So in 1969, a chap called Bill Townley, an amateur filmmaker, managed to make, over the course of 3 years, a pretty decent little independent film. And it's not a short film. It's almost a feature-length runtime. it's a massive passion project. So he was a Stoke boy from the same Bellsden, was it, Rob? From the same area,
Burslem, where I lived for a bit. Yeah, I actually ended up working out that I lived like 20 minutes away from one of the bridges in the movie, and I probably had walked back over it when I went back from uni one day. But I used to walk past Baskerville's statue. In the retail park when I used to go to uni. So it was quite cool to see him every morning.
So yeah, when we discovered that one it was about 3 years ago now, we were really excited about that, because one of the things we've always loved about theirs is the depiction of the Oosterbeek pocket and Longsdale Force and that kind of stuff. And that is kind of what Baskerville BC focuses on. So much so that there's like a little nod to it, isn't there? Well, the actual event, there's like a little board outside the church and stuff with a bit of his speech written on, which is a nice nod to the real event and the recreation in theirs is. So yeah, I wanted to bring that one up, Rob, as well. As soon as we saw that you guys wanted us to come on the show, we were like, oh, we're gonna have to talk about that as well, because it's just such an endearing film, because it's not professional, but it's not laughable either. He does a really good job.
Mm-hmm. And that's like semi-pro, and I mean that in the best possible way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I found it on VHS in the archive library at the Army Flying Museum about 6 months ago, and I watched it through my lunch break. In fact, over my lunch break. Great little find that was.
So there's the Staffordshire Film Archive basically found out about the film, and there was one final showing of the 16mm reel of it, because he shot it in 16mm like cinescope, which normally anything like amateur is shot in 8mm. And wasn't there a story that he used to get little bits of reel from other filmmakers, like the offcuts and
that was it. Yeah,
cut stuff together for a full reel of 16mm.
And he'd shoot what he could, and then he'd leave it a month or two, then shoot what he could. Yeah,
exactly. It's a really fascinating film when you watch it and you see there's all sorts of things. Like he managed to get there's the Queen's Lancers are in it in Chieftain tanks, not Chieftains, Centurions. And they're playing the attacking German tanks that Baskerville engage on the 2 6-pounders. And he managed to do that because he just got invited down, because they heard about he was making this film, and they invited him down to Salisbury Plain for a couple of days over a weekend on an exercise. And he just filmed the tanks moving at oblique angles and a bit of smoke from the engines and from the smoke discharges, and he managed.
They even let him painted little crosses on the tanks.
Yeah, they did.
They
got the German crosses on the sides of the Sentis. Because when we saw that, because we didn't know it was coming, we were like, oh my god, he got tanks! It's wild.
Yeah, and then the Staffordshire Film Archive, they lovingly restored it. We interviewed Ray Johnson from there.
Good
from
memory.
the archive.
I was trying to think of the chap's name. Yeah.
And, we learned so much more about the filmmaking process and how, just the stories of how he would get people to be extras, and he found this plane wing, and I think he hauled it back on a cart on his own from the junkyard and painted it up like it was a horse a wing.
He found a bridge that looked vaguely like Arnhem.
Yeah.
And it does.
That's the bridge I mean. I think I've been over it. It's such a love letter to Baskerville, but it's also like a love letter to Stoke in
and
that
cinema.
period, and cinema itself.
Yeah.
If you know anything about Baskerville, obviously there's something in it for you. But if you're a film lover, it's one of those movies that you watch where you think your brain's going, oh, well, that, that's not that. But then you think your heart goes, no, this is such a 1 in a million thing that deserves a lot more eyes on it.
There's the scene where there's a guy with an air rifle, what is clearly like a break barrel air rifle, and you're like, nice. And it doesn't detract. Some films, when they're not well made, when there's little things in kit, you start going, oh, well, that's a bit shit. That doesn't really work. That doesn't look right. That doesn't work. And and you become more nitpicky. But when a film has got heart to it and it's really well made and it's a passion project and you can feel that, you can just forget all the little niggly details of, oh, we couldn't get enough number 4s or whatever.
Yeah, and it's not been polluted by a studio.
Yeah, and it's just it shouldn't be forgotten in the sort of realm of airborne movies. It should be championed a lot more. And you can, I think, if any British listeners are listening, you can go on the Staffordshire Film Archive website and buy a DVD from them. Don't go on Amazon. I think you can find the VHSs on Amazon, but buy it from the Staffordshire Film Archive, because the work they do for film in Staffordshire is really great.
It is. And there's a little behind the scenes making of little doc type thing. They take Bill back to where he filmed it, and he talks about it, and it's really cool.
Yes.
It's just really good.
Yeah,
Really
that was on the video cassette as well, so that was really interesting.
And listen to our episode for the interview with Ray as well, because that's
Ray
really
knows a huge amount about the Bill and the making of the film. When we recorded that episode, Bill was still around. I hope he still is. He wasn't able to join us for the episode, but Ray was the next best chap to talk about that film, because he was the one that really pushed to get it saved, because as I said, Bill was going to do a couple more showings, and he was worried that the negative, the film would decay to the point where it couldn't be shown on a projector anymore. And he was, repairing it and stuff, and it was getting to the point where it could have been lost. And thankfully, the Staffordshire Film Archive stepped in and saved that.
I haven't seen it, so I can't give a rating. I'll defer to you, three gentlemen.
Kevin a copy of the DVD and a whatever region our DVDs are in. DVD player.
I've got to give it a 10 purely because for what it is.
For the love that's in it.
A definite 10. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a 10 too. I didn't know what I was looking at to begin with, but then when I got it, I thought it's a little gem. It's great.
Yeah,
it's at that time in the mid to late 60s, making a film must have seemed like an insurmountable, really difficult thing to even contemplate. People didn't have the access to technology to even record like home video in the UK at that point. Only the richest people that were very affluent could afford like 8mm cameras. Like
it's one of those feel-good stories from that like
stuff.
Home's video cine camera boom of like the late 60s, 70s. It's just it's a little treat. If you ever find it's a little treat.
Like it happened here. It's it always reminds me of that too.
Same vibe, very same vibe.
Well, gents, shall we move on to The Longest Day?
Ooh, okay.
Up the Ox and Bucks. Yeah.
Your thoughts, guys?
It's a film I kind of struggle with because I'm always 50-50 on it. There are great moments in there, Todd and the landing, the Weestrom sequence. But then as a movie critic, what we do on the show, I always I think we talked about it with Woody when we covered it. It's the longest film in a way, because every time you think, right, okay, credits now, oh God, there's another scene.
It's the return of the king of World War II movies.
It kind of is. But, there's just something about it where I do like it. Yeah, I have to watch it maybe like once every 3-4 years because it's a plant your bum down and you're not getting up for a bit.
I love there's so many vignettes within that film. It's a film of vignettes, really. It's the only way you can tell a story so big as Overlord in a successful manner. I mean, I love the little bit where John Gregson's playing a chaplain and he pops up out of the water looking for his communion kit. That's great. That's a really nice little sequence. It is. And that's the only scene Gregson's in. That's the only little bit of that. That does not come back to be any way important to the rest of the film. And a lot of filmmakers would have just gone, all right, well, that's bump. We can cut that. We can get another 5 seconds of Americans running up the beach in. But it's in there. It's in the film, and it gives it a bit of a human heart to it, and I really like that. And as Rob mentioned, like I love the Weestrom sections where there's a pier in there. That's really nice. But they're not airborne, are they? So we can't talk about them on here.
That sequence is actually filmed in Port-en-Besson, which was actually taken by the Commandos.
I mean, like it's that Pegasus Bridge sequence. It's
the little bit where it all goes quiet and it becomes like diegetic sounding. It's just the whistling of the wind as the glider comes in. Really, and the model work on it is so good. It's just really quintessential British model work of the early 60s, late 50s. Era.
Yeah. Although it does say the Orme River glider assault, and it was actually the Car Canal, but yeah.
They're not calling it Dead Stick either, are they?
Yeah.
Please don't mention that.
I have to get it in there.
We'll be here all night.
I know Robbie had mentioned this, that scene with the sappers that run down and they're doing hand over hand. I know it's complete bullshit, but here's the thing. The gravitas of Richard Todd pointing, going, check for demolition charges. He makes it believable in that film. And I'm in law enforcement. And to me, just a little scene is the lull in the battle and Richard Todd tactically reloads his Sten. And I know there's no way that was written in the script. That's him, either muscle memory or he says, this is what I did. This is what I was trained for. Same thing with my profession.
Do you carry a Sten gun then, Kev?
He wishes.
He
Yeah, yeah. It worked. Yeah, I wish I did, but
If they let you put like some Riz rails on the end, get some lasers on it, maybe they'll let you.
Yeah.
You know. No, it's the little bit where that you see the Canadian paratroopers like very extremely briefly, but they're in there.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, like this movie, it just puts a lot of stuff in, and you're thinking, well, no one will ever make this again, so thank God it exists, you know, and you're never going to top Todd being at Pegasus Bridge. Obviously, he's there, you know. I don't want to ruin the magic for Kev, but if you listen to his IWM interview he did in the 80s, early 90s, he horrendously misremembers the accuracy of the P at the bridge, which kind of annoys me. But, you know, they were asking a lot of loaded questions at that time. I'll say no more because then the IWM might not like me. But it's just
Were the
great.
weapons you had crap or...
Oh, they did a lot of that.
Come on.
The Pia and the Sten do horrifically, like, they get kicked about horrendously in the 90s. Everyone's like, oh, these guns made of pipe. Well, rubbish. And it's like, no, they weren't.
The spring-powered Pierce.
Oh, my God,
don't get me started.
Hey, don't get Matt started. Here would be here for hours.
I know now.
Oh, my word.
The thing about The Longest Day for me is, and how good that sequence is of the coup de main taking at the bridge, is I just want to see the rest of the day with them. I don't really care about everything else. I just want to see Wagger Thornton hit a German armored fighting vehicle. I can't say tank because we don't know exactly what it was. We know it was the first armored vehicle knocked out by infantry during the battle, and we know that there was a successfully engaged patrol boat as well, which would have been a fantastic little sequence.
Yeah.
Like, show Todd go, bloody hell, boys, there's a boat coming up the river. Yeah. You know, like, it could have been in there. Like, cut John Wayne out a bit. We don't need to see old John Wayne doddering around.
Getting pushed around on a bloody cart.
Show more of that. But there is a lot of that in that movie, even with like, some of the sequences with, like, really well-known actors. I'm always like, I don't need to see this. Mitchum is clearly too
they're
old.
for the credit, weren't they?
You know.
So the producers could say, they're in this movie.
John Wayne was playing a 27-year-old.
True, yeah. It's the most stunt-casted, probably, 60s movie. But it's great, isn't it? It's still good. But I as a film viewer, I kind of 50-50 on it. But the sequences that we're talking about now are fabulous. Yeah.
It's just not physically possible anymore. Even Private Ryan couldn't really match the scale of The Longest Day. It could match it for visuals and surpass it for visuals, but it couldn't really match the scale of the actual operation. It's just not really possible. And Longest Day is the closest we're ever going to get to someone managing to show the bulk of what happened in probably the most important day in European history and world history in the 20th century.
If the listeners know anything about the history of that film, basically that film saved 20th Century Fox. They were hemorrhaging money from Cleopatra. And I think to make a film of that scale, one, you couldn't do it, but two, I think the studio would be so involved and so meddling, you just wouldn't be able to tell.
You've got so many cooks as well. You've got like 3 directors. You've got half a dozen assistant directors and you know, second unit dudes working on stuff all over the place. It must have been an absolute undertaking.
There was some French politics involved as well. Locations and pumping up the French role in the movie in exchange for being able to use the actual locations. The Canadians get stiffed basically in that movie.
It's the second time they've been stiffed on this episode, Forgotten Battle. So, you know,
the movie industry and the Canadian Armed Forces do not get along.
No, it's got to be. Oh, might sound harsh, but I'm giving it a 7.
7. Oh man,
I'm going to give it an 8.
Andy,
I'm going to go for a 9. I still love it.
You know what? I'm going to go with Andy. I go 9 only because Richard Todd and that the gravitas that he brings, it just makes everything that he's in completely believable.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
We're getting ready to drop into Arnhem now. Let's go with A Bridge Too Far.
I love it, but I love it for strange reasons. So Matt will know what I mean. But like, I think for about a 10-year period, I was always like, I can give or take this. Like, I like it, but I like certain parts. And then when we started doing Fighting on Film, and we were so lucky to interview a lot of the Attenborough's Private Army lads, we couldn't believe our luck when they happened. You know, really helped us, and it just amazing to tell their stories. So when we met them, and you hear what they did and the process of doing it, then I have a different appreciation for it now, because we know everything that went on, and our relationship with Sebastian has just grown and grown, and he's such an amazing guy, and he wrote an amazing biography about his time called The Boys from the Bridge. I think it's out of print at the moment, but you can get a copy every here and there on Amazon, I think, or eBay. They pop up, and it's just like, to make that, as we said, The Longest Day, that's hard to make. But this movie, I'm not saying it's harder to make, but just the steps to get it done is incredible. So everyone hates the James Caan sequence, but the James Caan sequence saved that movie. So that's why it feels like a miniature movie, because Attenborough took that to Japan and showed the Japanese investors that. They bought pre-rights to show it in Japan. That saved the film. Everyone looks at the box office take for Bridge Too Far and they go, oh, well, it was a flop. It wasn't. It was in profit before it went to film. So it made a huge profit for the studio that made it. But it's really great. You know, there's bits of it I'm not as keen on. I know the American bits I can give or take, really. And there's no Oosterbeek defence. There's like a box of crates with lads defending Hartstein for 2 seconds or something. And that's your Oosterbeek perimeter. And that's it. But like, for what Seb and the chaps did on set and everything else, superb.
Absolutely. And it immortalised the pier in the popular consciousness. So, you know, I can only thank the film for that one. I wouldn't have known about its existence if not for that film, if I hadn't seen that film like 25, 30 years ago and go, oh, look, it's a weird bazooka thing. And, you know, fast forward 20 years later, I end up writing a book about it. And
my dad made me, when I was a kid, a Piat based on the back of me seeing that movie. He was a toolmaker, and he went off with a bit of drain pipe and come back with both work metal and a monopod and everything and canvas.
Incredible.
When I was about 8 or 9 years old. So,
There's a great on-set story of the fire of the stunt guy who shot it. So he was told, you cannot miss because the charge is ready to go, and you've got one take at this, because to reset it up is going to cost so much money. First shot, bang, right there, you know. And the dude, it just went off. That's
amazing. In the program, that isn't it? The story about that is actually in the program.
Yeah.
Seb told us a really interesting story, didn't he? Where they were trying to get a down the barrel shot, and they put like a piece of glass in front of the camera, but the round went straight through that and broke the camera lens. And the two AD had been told, for God's sake, do not break any cameras. But he was adamant he was going to get this shot that they never used because they broke the camera.
And I don't know if this is in his book or not, but he told us this when we were leaving We Have Waves Festival last year, and we were just ending our sort of saying goodbye and that. And he went, oh, chaps, I've still got a H-sack from the film. It's in the garden as a plant pot. And we were like, amazing. And then he went, well, everyone was stealing bits from the wardrobe. You know, a load of guys got bags of Denisons and whatever that they wanted to take home. And he was chatting to one of the armourers, and he was like, could I take a Mark V Sten home? And the guy went, okay. And then he wanted the armourer to weld the bits of the Sten underneath his car so it looked like the axles and stuff. And the armourer was like,
we would have loved that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I think the armourer in the end just said no. Like,
probably wise.
Like, I just can't let you do that. But like, it just sounds like the fun and frolics behind the scenes of that movie now is what makes it for me. But in terms of scenes, I love the scene where, and I'm doing him a disservice because I forget the chap's name that runs in. But when Sean Connery and the lads escape from the house, there's a scene where South Stas come in and wipe a load of Jerry's off a tank. Yeah. And I love that. It's just a great little sort of Fibula-esque moment. But I asked the actor why he was holding the Mark V Sten like a Mark II Sten, as if he'd remember something that happened 50 years ago. But he was, he's
got a really weird grip, doesn't he?
He said, well, what he told us that he was doing Audie Murphy acting, because he said, I knew it was going to be my one featured scene, and he wanted to do the best he could. So that's like he says that's his Audie Murphy moment.
He goes for it. It's great.
He really does. That's a great sequence, and I like the drop because it's all done for real.
Yeah.
You know, there's just parts of the film, you know, that are so well made, but it's for me now more so it's the making of. I just find that absolutely fascinating.
I know you guys are, you know, I love the alley telling, and talk about alley is look at all the different cap badges in that film. You know, they're not all just paras. I mean, you got glider pilot, you got South Stats. I mean,
there was literal like barn size wardrobe for it. You know, I think
Yeah.
Seb and the chaps were just saying you'd walk in one morning and there'd be, it'd be like, right, there's M43. Now you're Americans. There's battle dress. Now you're that. And there's a story that Seb tells when the 25 pounders are going off and some drop short. I think a big charge went off next to him and all of his mates, and they emerged from the smoke like dazed. I think he's clutching a Piat at the time, and they sort of like wander off shot, and they're like really really warped. And apparently Amber just goes, "That was fantastic, boys. Great, keep going," and like just didn't ignore the fact that a charge went right off near them and really hurt them all. It's so great, and like even the kit is really good for the time. Really good attention to detail there, because in the 70s, I think kit standards dropped in a lot of these movies a little bit, but they really went for it. So Attenborough showed all of the APA men because the casting process was quite not rigorous, but a load of chaps went to this. I think it was this big hall in London, and Attenborough went through a line of chaps, and he went yes, no, 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 yes, and lads were absolutely crestfallen that they didn't get chosen. Apparently some were like sort of nearly in tears because they weren't going to be going on it. Mm-hmm. And then after they did that, he sat them down, and this might segue really well into the next movie. He sat them down and he showed them Theirs Is the Glory in full, and he stood up at the end and he pointed at the screen and he said, "That's who we're going to be remembering, boys. You have to get this right." And I think they did.
For me, the scene that you could tell they took care and research in that is the glider scene, the takeoffs. And when you see the chalk that says S. Sergeant Victor Miller, S. Sergeant Tom Hollingsworth, those are real guys. Staff Sergeant Victor Miller wrote Nothing Is Impossible. He was there in Arnhem, and it's just like, that is detail.
It's Attenborough's love letter to Arnhem, and the way he was on set and how he helped get that movie made. Because there was points where I think they were worried they weren't going to get it over the line, and then it was like he was thinking, well, I'll get James Caan in and I'll show that away and I'll get the money. It's
as if I have to ask, but Matt, your favorite scene from that film that pops into your head?
The one I quote the most to Rob is, "It's there to go, boys. They're here." Like that will be just something I'll throw out at him at any point in the day.
But we change that to whatever's happening. So if Matt turns up at my house when we're going away for some foff errand, he's like, "It's Matthew Moss, Robbie. He's here."
I love Anthony Hopkins in that film. I think he's fabulous in the role. I think he does such a good job of not overcooking it. It's quintessential. The countless afternoons as a young lad watching that film and reenacting it on the stairs and doing strange things with Lego guns and stuff. It's just
done that.
Oh yeah. I was going to say, when Edward Fox pulls up to the theater and gets out of the Jeep and goes, "Thank you, Waddy," which was a tip to Colonel John Waddy, who was in 156 Para.
And an advisor on the film.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So Andy, what's your scene?
We haven't the proper facilities to take you all prisoner. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I know it's an amalgam of characters. I know it's a kind semi-fictionalized account of what went on, but I still love that scene.
It's good, isn't it? It is good. Yeah.
It is.
Good script writing.
Yeah. So what do we think, lads?
8 out of 10, and I'm taking 2 marks off because they cut Sebastian's scene where he has some lines, and he was very miffed about that.
Yes.
He didn't get more pay. I'm taking 2 off for Seb there, but a very good 8.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a solid 9 because it brought a very unusual weapon into the popular consciousness of the rich public. Good or bad, it's a great little scene. Anthony Hopkins saying "bring up the pier" it is meme-worthy, and it's become a meme, obviously, but I mean, it's just so good.
Andy?
Well, as you know, Ken, I'm kind of biased about this one.
You are.
I have a family connection to Market Garden. My grandfather was part of 30 Corps, 43rd Wessex Division. So it was his favourite movie. I've got to give it a 10 on nostalgia alone. I mean, I love the movie. I'd say that and Aliens are my 2 top favourite movies.
Not bad there. It's good, yeah.
Yeah. You know what, guys? I got to give it a 10 only because it started this affliction of mine. I can remember vividly sitting in my grandparents' living room watching this film with my grandfather. So I got to go with a 10.
It is one of those nostalgia war movies. It's what I always refer to on the show as like a bank holiday war movie. It's like that and Zulu and The Longest Day. They're films that just were on so often on those kind of occasions where you just intrinsically mentally link it to them, and it becomes this nostalgia hit whenever they're on.
For our final film, gentlemen, Theirs Is the Glory.
The very first film we ever covered.
The film that made fighting on film happen, essentially.
Yes.
So long story short, I only met Matt in 2020 during COVID. Everyone thinks we've known each other our entire lives, but we haven't. Because I needed some information on Sten guns. And I'd heard there was this chap, who would know? And I could have Googled it, to be fair, but I'm glad I didn't, because I messaged Matt, and then, 6 months later we were doing the show. But
you were doing a spot on Woody's show, weren't you?
That was it. Yeah, really early days for me. But I kind of think one night, Matt was like, "Oh, have you seen a film called Theirs Is the Glory?" And I was like, "I have, actually." And we just got chatting about how this movie is so great, but yet, unless you've seen it or you have a reason to see it, it's not really in the popular consciousness. I think now, over the years, it's gained this reputation for being possibly one of the most accurate films ever made. I don't mean in terms of every single scene is nailed on accurate, but for what it is and how it was made, everything else, I'm sure we'll get onto that.
Super
but that's
authentic.
the movie super authentic. It's the movie that kicked off the show, and it is just such a outlier for the time. And it's made in 1946, only 9 months after Arnhem. Actually, interestingly enough, Brian Desmond Hurst was the director was prepping to go out to Arnhem and film it this month. This was pre-production time back in 45, because the war was over in Europe, at least. Just the magnitude of it.
Don't move that tiger. Leave that tiger.
Leave that tiger there. It's such a interesting movie. It uses real paras that were stationed in Norway. They bring them over. They pay them, I think was it 1 and 6 or something like that, and they make a movie about Arnhem. Everyone on set is either there or was there in some kind of capacity or remembers the war. Desmond Hurst himself was a propaganda. He started from propaganda. One of his big films is The Lion Has Wings in 1939. And it's such a wonderful film for everything that's in it.
Well, yeah, it's a transformative film when you watch it for the first time. You sit there and go, oh, some of this acting's a bit hammy. And then when you realise that they're actually there, just reenacting what they'd done, you're like, oh, okay, well, I think we can let them off. These guys had never been on camera. They'd never even performed on stage or done any of that. And they're delivering entire scenes to camera, which makes it all the more kind of mind-blowing that Desmond Hurst sat down and was like, I think we're gonna use as many principal chaps that were there as we can to make this film as accurate and authentic as possible. To the point where they're paying a £5 bounty to chaps to provide anecdotes for flavour, little things.
But the guy takes the K-gun off of the Jeep and takes it with him. That happened. And I think it is actually the same chap that does it. But there's some fantastic on-set things Matt was talking about. There was a chap, a para, I can't remember what regiment he was. I think he was Gliderborne Infantry. I think we talked about it on the show. So he sets up for a shot, jumps in a foxhole that was already dug. And it's not his foxhole, but he's doing the shot. And all the villagers are kind of watching from their windows, After the shot's gone, a girl and a mum come out of the house, and they sort of wander up to him quite gingerly, and I think he was having a cigarette or something. And they start touching him and feeling his denison and feeling his, his webbing up, and he's sort of confused at what they're doing. And then they get a translator over and they talk to the people, and they were saying, "We thought you were a ghost." They didn't know a movie was being shot in Arnhem. Probably not, but it's this whole kind of connection with this movie. And the Airborne Forces is obviously eternal. But it's little moments like that, that really bring this film together. Yeah. Really is.
And the fact that locals were used as extras for the for the Germans as well, and all the
quite happy about that, were they?
Yeah, and all the emotions that must have stirred up and conjured. It must be.
Yeah,
it's a truly fascinating film for so many reasons. Not only because it is a film that was made entirely by people that were there, but also it's probably the most succinct telling of the battle from the British perspective.
Yeah. There's no chaff.
What's a film
in this movie?
No, there's no chaff. It's great.
No.
And there's little sequences that are just so beautiful. All the Piat sequences in it are just profoundly excellent. Because the chaps that knew how to use a Piat, they used it. They knew what was capable of, how to use it. And the inclusion of, I think there's 2, possibly maybe 2.5, 3 sequences where there's Piats used. There's the one where the cook obviously knocks out the tiger.
Yeah. Dickie, take that. Go and have a crack at me with the Piat.
Go and have a crack at those panzers.
Chuck that nest in. Beautiful. The Char B bit for me is the Piat.
Oh, the Char B is great.
Yeah. You can see how fast they can reload that thing as well.
Yeah.
And that I did a video on it on my YouTube channel talking about. I've broken down a couple of Piat scenes from various different films, a couple of Polish ones as well. And the point I made was these guys were trained to use it. They knew how to use it. They'd used it in action. This is the most authentic depiction of what a Piat could do and how it could be used. Because they fire it 3 times in less than 40 seconds. And as long as it cocks, the Piat can do that. It can go all day. It's unlike a bazooka, which in films, what annoys me is in films, they never show you that with a bazooka of that period, you have to attach the wires the contact wires to get the rocket to ignite, which actually, slows down the rate of fire of a bazooka to below a pit. Just one of those little movie nitpicking things. There's does a great job of showing how all the weapons, and I love the sound throughout the film. All the you can tell that all the Stens are being fired. They're all getting single shots off. It's all just single cracks, and then there's a little burst now and then. Little things about that film that you pick up and you go, oh, that's beautiful.
And what I like as well, when they attack the pillbox of the bridge, you can actually hear them shouting Wahoo Mohammed.
Yeah. For me, my favourite sequence, and he redone it, but they use the original audio. It's Stanley Maxted correspondence from the drops, the resupply drops. He's like, these beautiful gliders, these beautiful men, these wonderful air crews. He's Canadian war correspondent, Stanley Maxted, and he went over with Guy Byam, who later is instrumental in the BBC. But it's Maxted for me. He's the only filmy, almost, part of the film. But then I love it because Maxted is playing himself on location. He's got the midget recorder. You've never seen any other movie apart from this. Absolutely superb. Really great representation of a war correspondent. He's there. But then that inspires Maxted to kind of become an actor. And he has this really short little career in B-movies. So he does some classic B-movie horrors. I think he's in a couple of dramas. But it just inspires this little thing. And he also goes over, when the movie comes out, he goes back to Arnhem and records a kind of on-the-ground documentary about remembering what happened. And that's in the BBC archives. I've yet to listen to it. But it's Maxted for me. He makes the movie. His little cheerful disposition about what's going on, his eternal want for the men around him to be able to get the means to fight. It's not that these men can't hold, it's just they need the means to do it. And you feel that emotion, and using that original audio, having these nice little sequences where you have chatter with other correspondents, it grounds the movie and it sort of takes the pressure off the airborne guys because they don't have to give sort of stilted lines. I think a lesser director would have gone, oh, well, we'll get those two chaps to have a lovely conversation, and it would have just taken away from the movie. The only thing I would have loved to have seen is Byam and Maxted in the glider going back and having the Bakelite reel stuffed under their Denisons, because they got back on a Dakota and I think they got a taxi or a bus to BBC Television Centre as it was then, and they just hand over these Bakelite reels and they're still in their full kit. They haven't washed, changed. There's so many. This is the movie. If you want to know about Arnhem, watch this first, because it's such a good jumping off point for tangents. So I became obsessed with Stanley Maxted and war correspondence in the Second World War from this film. I bought a Denison smock because of this film. Oh, it's just an exquisite movie. I love it. But it hits so hard at the end when you're back in that billet room and they're reading out the names. And there's about 3 men in that room. And then you get Maxted saying, I think it might be Leo Genn, actually. Where he goes, they came from Arnhem, and it reads it over,
it's
and
Genn,
it fades. It's Genn, But it's so hard hitting. I don't think any other film, apart from a couple, maybe The Cruel Sea, maybe something else that I can't remember off the top of my head, doesn't get the human cost of war like the end of theirs does.
Yeah, that's the bookend. The start of the film, he owns a fish shop. He's telling you who these men were. None of them had military backgrounds. You were finding out that they were ordinary people. And then, like you said, at the end, you find the cost of what these ordinary guys were. And
And the sequence of going over the river to get back over, fantastic. You've still got men. You can hear the men still fighting to fend off that German counterattack. You get so much of Oosterbeek in there. Every single scene is fantastic. Nothing is wasted in this.
Lonsdale in the church. Lonsdale in the church is
that is
Lonsdale
amazing.
doing his bit. Lonsdale doing Lonsdale. How he didn't get in any other movies is beyond me. But
the thing is, if this film hadn't been made how it was made, you could have had Niven as Lonsdale, and that would have been fabulously watchable, and it would have been brilliant. But it wouldn't have been the same, would it? And the thing about theirs is that it captures all of these men as they were during the battle. It's not like Todd 25 years later doing the bridge sequence, which he looks great. He's fine. It's not Wayne level of like age difference, but he looks great in the role. He's very, he's fabulous in it. But these guys are like 14 months older than they were during the battle. It's nothing. It's them at their prime with the experience of the battle right at the fore of their minds.
Yeah. They don't overcook that sequence. It was something that happened. A handful of men heard what happened. heard that speech, from Lonsdale, and then that's it. They don't go back to it. If this was a modern movie, we'd have like a montage of men chatting to their friends and like, you know, I think they'd even have done this in the 50s. You'd have had like Chinese whispers of, oh, did you hear what Lonsdale said? And they'd like pass it down the line and it would be this massive kind of rousing thing. But it kind of isn't. It happened. Guys told each other what happened. But because of the freneticness of that Easterbeek battle, if someone said, oh, well, this major stood up in a church and told us all to fight and shoot well, you know, and kill the Germans, you're going to forget that 2 moments later when a child beast comes out of a tree line. You know, like, they don't overcook anything. Nothing is overplayed. It's all understated. Yeah. It's gritty, but it's also realistic. And I think that's why the movie is so well done.
And I think it's also one of those films that you look back, there's not one scene where you could go, yeah, they didn't need that.
And I only think you get a movie like theirs is because of this mid-war switch by Ealing Studios and the Crown Film Unit and other movie studios. We go to a semi-realistic documentary style of filmmaking, and a lot of great directors cut their teeth on these movies during the, you know, something like Western Approaches or San Demetrio, London. They have this underlying grittiness because you're making a movie for everyone who's going to see it is in the war, or by the point this comes out, they've been through it. They know people are affected by it. You don't have to spoon feed your audience like you do now. And I think that's why this movie works in the way it does, is because it doesn't have to sugarcoat anything. There was a guy we met who's, I think, one of the We Have Ways met, wasn't it? He said he got one of their billets or something. He got them all to watch it because he knew that the younger lads hadn't seen it. And he was like, look, this is what being a para is all about. Mm-hmm. You know, it still resonates. And that's another great thing.
And same music composer as Bridge Too Far, John Anderson.
Yeah. It almost is like you're watching a movie tone or the newsreel before, you know, when you go to the cinema and they always show, and then it's the newsreels. It has that feel to it.
That's that semi-documentary realism coming through.
Yeah.
Well, what do we think, gentlemen?
10. It's an unadulterated 10.
11, you know. Fantastic.
Love it.
You know.
Andy?
It's a 10.
Yeah.
It's a 10.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a 10.
So we've got 41 out of 40.
There you go. Yeah. No, it's just superb. It's just such a great war film. It's such a great British war film. Right.
Yeah. Well, Robbie and Matt, Andy and I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your thoughts. I could sit and chat with you guys all night long, but then again, you're 5 hours ahead of me. So.
No, you're very welcome, chaps. It's been very, very fun. No problem.
Yeah, thanks ever so much. But unfortunately, the landlord is giving us the eye. I think he's going to be ringing that bell soon. So we're going to have to bring this episode of Ham and Jam to a close. I'm going to add my thanks to Robbie and Matt. But unfortunately, it's time, gentlemen, please, on another episode of Ham and Jam. So if you'd just like to raise your glass, cheers.
Cheers. And Ham and Jam.
Ham and Jam.
Ham and Jam.
Thanks for listening to Ham and Jam. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help Andy and Kevin make more, please support us on buymeacoffee.com.
Andy, babe, listen,